Hello, everyone. So, sorry to be a little bit late. A few technical issues this end with people running around, panicking all over the place. Mainly me, I have to say. It's all my fault. So, this is the second in our tales from the group, and this incredibly handsome gentleman we have before us is the circumspect Mr. Zahid Hussain, a good friend of mine, and I'm sure a good friend of many of you on the group. So, how are you, mate? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I guess as good as it can be, given everything that's going on at the minute. But yeah,
how's
surviving,
lockdown?
Thriving.
How's lockdown treated you?
It's been pretty good, actually. I think, I guess, like the joke, most of us have been probably practicing all our lives for this. But yeah, no, it's been good. Yeah, work's fine.
Yeah.
Working from home. It's nothing's really changed too much, to be honest.
I'm a little bit disappointed not to see a big lockdown beard going on. I think you've let yourself down, you've let me down, and more importantly, you've let the viewers down.
Yeah, yeah. We'll talk about kind of badges of honour and thing in the community. We'll come on to all of that.
Yeah. So, mate, you've been a member of the group now. I don't know whether you know this. Do you know this? How long you've been a member? Have you done your homework?
I haven't. No, 3 years, 4 years.
No, April 2015.
Wow,
Long time. Over 5 years now. Now, you invited me to this group. So, are you familiar with the phrase, every good turn gets its own reward? Yeah. So, this is payback night now for you. See, this is a reward you've got for actually adding me to the group in the first place. You have cost me thousands of pounds, Mr. Hussain, over the years. Absolute fortunes, because I think you, probably more than anybody else, certainly not, I'm an unwilling victim in all this. You're probably one of the main reasons I got back into modern gaming. And as a consequence to your huge collection, I got collection envy, which means it was very, very hard on my wallet. So what we're going to do, mate, is we're going to set some baselines, to test you, okay? So this is a rapid fire question answer session. Are you ready, contestant? Yep. Okay. Mechanics or theme?
Mechanics.
Okay. Well, Adam asks, what is your favourite mechanic? Adam in the comments below here.
I think if you asked, I think up until recently, I think I probably would have said worker placement, but I think probably today auctions, I think.
Auctions, right, yeah. So bidding.
Yeah.
Bit of bluffing going on there as well, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you're changing men. So, space or farm?
Farm.
Farm, I thought so. Especially with what you've got going on in your personal life at the moment. I've seen many pictures. You've sent me many pictures of your small holding. This will not come as no surprise to anybody. And I've seen the amount that you're growing in your back garden.
Yeah, I've got to try and recoup some of that money for board games, I think. So
yeah, because they don't grow in trees, do they? They don't.
True.
So, I think you're the only person I've ever heard that's had a heated argument in a shop about Lego. Is this true?
This is true, yeah. Despite what my son might think, I don't know. I kind of never had Lego as a child. Probably because I never had it as a child. Kind of, it's just grown up. It's model making. It's not a toy. Lego is not a toy.
Okay. So if there's anyone who wants to argue about that, that's a whole show in itself with Zahid, because Zahid is probably one of the most argumentative and obstinate people I know. I think that's fair to say, mate.
Yeah.
So can you alarm and astound the viewers with the size of your collection? How many pieces have you got in your collection at the moment, do you think?
I think according to BGG, I think the latest count was about 1,500.
How many?
1,500.
1,500.
Yeah.
Well, that's accelerated a little bit.
A little bit.
Do I have to plan some sort of intervention?
Possibly, yeah. No, it's. I think lockdown probably hasn't helped with kind of access to the internet and kind of anything and everything you can get at your fingertips.
Yeah. So, how much do you think, on average, you would spend on a Kickstarter in a month? Vicky's not listening to this, is she? So, be as honest as you possibly can.
I think that's one of the big changes. I think I'm actually not buying, I think, much, if anything at all, straight retail. I think everything that seems to be coming through the letterbox at the moment is Kickstarter only, but maybe 2 or 3 pledges a month, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah. And what's the
couple
average
hundred
price
quid,
of a
maybe?
Kickstarter? About,
yeah,
I think, anywhere between 50 and 100 quid at the minute, isn't it, for most Kickstarters?
yeah, something like that. So not as much as it once was.
No, I think I've definitely slowed down on the kind of cult of the new stuff. I think that's kind of when I got into it. I think I'd be like everybody. You'd rush out to buy all the latest and greatest, and I'd want to show everybody, including yourself. And I think as kind of tastes refine, you kind of start to be a bit more picky about the kind of things you like.
Good man. It's about time you're a bit more picky, especially with your friends. So Joshua, a mutual friend of ours, has asked, what game would you not sleeve?
There's no game I wouldn't sleeve. I think all games, when they come through, are insta sleeve, and then they get played. They only get de-sleeve when they leave the collection, which isn't really a thing that ever happens.
So let me get this right. So when you sell a game, you take the time and the effort to take all the sleeves off.
Yep.
Okay, it's probably time to actually disclose also you're one of the tightest men I know. I think that's fair to say. You do like a bargain, don't you? And you do like your sleeves, obviously. So Graham would like to know what game, because we know you're into your films, we're going to come on to that in a moment, but what game would you make into a film if you possibly could?
Game into a film. Probably one I haven't played, something like Blood Rage, maybe.
Blood Rage, oh, that'd be a good one.
Yeah.
Now that's dangerously close to fantasy and mythos for you, Zahid. So that surprises me. So you constantly surprise me. That's good. So what film would you make into a game? Chewy asks us. That's a good one, isn't it? Well,
film into a game, maybe something like Big Short. So kind of financial, economic, running a company till it busts, stocks, that kind of thing.
Okay, good. Bit like what I do in real life. So, who's your favourite designer at the moment, mate?
Reiner.
I presume you've got one.
Yeah, Knizia, I think. Yeah, definitely. It's just range of games, mechanics, the kind of cleverness of the scoring, very mathy. It's my kind of.
Yeah, it's your jam, as you like to say.
Yeah.
Good man. So, what are your top 5? What are your top 5 games that you would, if I came round and tied you up and took your collection away and only would leave you 5, what would those 5 be, mate?
Tammany Hall.
Yeah.
Agricola. Patchwork. I think I'm probably going to have a splotter in there. So Food Chain Magnate.
Oh, boo. Boo.
And
I'm only leaving you 4.
Okay. And yeah, I think there's got to be a bit of equivalence. Probably Gloomhaven, I think. So never played it, had it for a couple of years now, not even touched it. And I think if I'm on a desert island, it's probably going to be the one that'll probably get looked at first.
Yeah. So if you're on a desert island, you want the ones that float, surely.
Yeah, I could probably fit in that one as well.
Yeah, you not fall that through, really. You want the light ones that float. So just to move things along, Jaffa cake or biscuit?
I know it's technically a cake, but you put it with the biscuits. It's in the biscuit tin.
Okay. Well, so I see your rationale there. And lastly, I know this is a question very close to your heart. Is a leek a flower worthy of a nation on the back of a £1 coin?
Absolutely not. It's not a flower.
Okay. It's not a flower, is it? You've been shortchanged there somewhere, haven't you, mate?
Very much
so. So we've established your gaming credentials now, and I know that you grew up in Swansea with your family. Anyone that's now heard you talk can hear your Welsh accent. So what was your first exposure? Because again, this is my assumption. You wouldn't have had a lot of popular pop kind of culture coming into the house. So what was your first exposure into modern gaming, do you think?
Modern gaming, I think, other than... I think my parents came over to the UK in the 70s. didn't really. I think despite them integrating pretty well, I think they weren't really into kind of films or what most other people were doing at the time. I think so. Yeah, we didn't really have those kind of things in the house. But yeah, I don't think I played kind of Monopoly or any kind of mass market stuff. But there was always kind of a deck of cards. We'd always play sort of card games and trick-taking games with parents. That was pretty much it, to be fair.
Yeah. So that would have been the sort of the genesis of your trick-taking kind of obsession. I think it's an obsession, isn't it? So what sort of games? I mean, these games must have names. Would there be any names of any particular games you want to point people at?
I think there's one. I think in particular, I think it's from the kind of Southern Asian kind of side of things. It's called Rung, which is Urdu for colour or trump, I guess. It's a 4-player trick-taking game. It was the only game that we played with our parents. So it's a partnership trick-taking game. So me, my dad versus my mum and my older brother, and we would play till the small hours most nights of the week. We'd play
not on a school night, surely.
School nights as well. I think it was just as soon as dinner was finished, it would be we'd have a TV, but it wouldn't really get much of a look at, to be fair. So we'd keep meticulous scores of who won the most, beating people to nil, those kind of things. And it was for the largest part of my youth. It's probably the only game that we played in the house.
Yeah. So what was the first modern game that came into the house?
So what was that?
What was the first modern game? What we would consider to be a modern game come into the house?
I think it's probably Ludo. I think.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard you talk about Catan as well.
Yeah, I think that's the one that I would say probably got me into hobby. I think I heard somebody on a podcast I was listening to 7, 8, 9 years ago mention it, and then I looked into it. I got a copy, played it 2 players, played 2 players, and I was away.
Mm. So there's a few people saying hello in the chat. So Leanne's in the chat saying hello. A few other bits of people. I'm ignoring them, mate. We're having too good a time to actually include anybody else in our conversation. So Mark's just thrown me a couple of messages through whenever anyone says anything interesting. So we won't be interrupted very much because no one says anything really very interesting. So in terms of your identity as a person, I know you're very proud to be Welsh. I know to my cost how Welsh you are. But you've lived most of your life basically outside of Wales, haven't you? You lived most of your life in England. So in terms of your identity, in terms of how your hobbies have shaped you, including ball gaming, obviously, how do you see yourself? How do you see yourself in this society and in the ball gaming sort of community, as it were? And how do you think other people see it?
Don't want to really say what other people think. It's probably for another conversation, probably later in the evening. But I think in terms of how I see myself, I think I've always tried to be somebody who's got something to say. I try and give back. Yes. Try and give some suggestions where I can. I think having been around at least the modern part of the hobby for a while now, I think I feel like I've got a good handle on, kind of suggestions for things. And yeah, I think there's nothing better than somebody coming back to me, having played a game that I've shown them or recommended and saying they really liked it. And I think that's always the big win for me, is people coming back to you after they've tried it. So
Steve Mansur in the group basically said that he thinks of you as a good teacher of games. Is it? I mean, I would beg to differ. Obviously, I would beg to differ. But having been on the receiving end of a couple of fiascos, but you've got a very measured way of actually methodically and logically going through a rule book. And explaining it in your lilting, lovely, melodious tones, and so where does that come from? Your ability to absorb rules and explain them.
I think having kids is a big part of that. Kind of having to break things. Not necessarily saying that someone like Steve or yourself talks to my kids, but I think it's the classic. You start from the kind of. You go back, and I think, how do you win? How do you get points? And then you go back to mechanics from that, I think. So if you're starting by saying everybody starts with 5 money and whatever else, I think you're going to lose people. So how do you win, how do you get points, and then you normally work back to there. And I think that tends to be a good framework for getting people along.
Yeah. Well, that's quite interesting, because I've always found if you work your way backwards from the victory conditions, you understand the game a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely.
I think I've probably learned that from you, because I can't learn anything myself without having it explained to me, as you know. So, no doubt you've been seeing a lot of the debates, and I don't know. I know you well enough to know that you don't get into social media spats or anything like that. You keep your counsel fairly close to your chest, but no doubt you've been quite interested in the debates that are going on in social media around about Black Lives Matter, and whether the industry, not just in this country but worldwide, is as inclusive as it should be and as welcoming. So as part of that, one of the interesting things I've noticed is that quite a few people have repeated that people of colour have basically said things like they felt they need permission to be within the hobby. What do you think people mean by that? Is that something you feel as well?
Yeah, I can definitely identify with that. I think coming from, especially from an Asian background, I think where maybe games and I think hobbies in general probably looked down upon as a way to spend your time in pursuits where it's all about being more academic or work, and obviously a large degree. I think you go into your adult life already on the back foot when it comes to, guess how they would look at it, frittering away your free time. I mean, if I told my dad that 3 or 4 times a year I leave the family and go to other parts of the country, play board games the whole weekend, he'd probably say I was being entirely selfish. So,
well, you are, aren't you? You are being entirely selfish. He's completely right.
Yeah, but I think in terms of needing permission, I think it's, I think you've got people on one side already a little bit hesitant about entering something new or seeing something which is a use of their free time, and then find that with what some people have said about the type of reception they get when they go into either a game store or a convention or a meetup group or whatever, where there's an established group. I think when you have two sides like that, you can often come across a bit of a stalemate.
Yeah, I mean, is that anything look, I'm your mate. I should know this, and I'm frightened to have to ask you this question because I'm oblivious to everything that goes on around me, as you know. But have you ever come across anything like that, whether it be in the company of others or if you've gone in alone? Have you ever felt uncomfortable in a situation?
Yeah, I think there probably have been times. I think probably at the time it happened is you'd probably just put it down to you or yourself, where you probably blame yourself for not thinking that the conventions of how you're supposed to hold yourself or what you're supposed to say or how you're supposed to talk in those situations. But I think obviously the moment that we're in now, I think it's definitely given everybody a bit of pause for thought to look back on times like that and think, actually, was there a bit more at play then? So, and I guess that's kind of a horrible thing, is that you, at the time, you blame yourself for it, thinking, I'm not behaving like everybody, or I'm not saying the right things, or I'm maybe not getting the reception I want. And then obviously now you look back and you think, no, actually, you probably
was a bit more in that than I gave credit to.
Yeah, I think I've probably been a bit. I don't think I've got anything too dramatic or anything massive I'd like to fall on, but I think I've walked through conventions, or I've walked into situations where I at the time I probably thought not necessarily walking through a convention. I think am I maybe not being as approached as much as anybody else would be to come in and join something, or that kind of thing. But I think looking back on a lot of things, there's definitely lots of little things I can think of. Yeah,
I mean, because you're quite an avid convention attendee, aren't you? I mean, many people will know your trolley more than they know you. You're quite famous for your trolley.
Yeah, it's normally quite a good icebreaker. It's normally the thing I'm known for most when I'm wandering around convention halls. So yeah, I think that probably it's probably a question for somebody a bit more clinically qualified. But you could probably say, the fact that this guy needs a big bright orange wagon full of games is to kind of feel like he should be expected probably says something. So I think for me, I think that's pulling along a big wagon of games. It's normally people are going to look at it and think, actually, this guy knows what he's talking about. This guy, I want to engage with this person. So there's probably something to that.
Yeah, I mean, now I know you've travelled abroad. I know you don't enjoy travelling, but you have travelled to Essen to a convention there, and you drove across Europe with a couple of other group members. So I think it was Craig, wasn't it? Craig Taylor you went with?
Yeah,
Chris
Craig and Chris. Yeah.
But you had a couple of instances there where you were crossing borders, where you encountered things that the rest of us would take for granted. But it's always some sort of degree of anticipation whenever you go into a situation like that, don't you?
Yeah, I think I think the trips to Essen have been, by and large, have actually been probably one of the better experiences I've had. I've driven out the times that I've been, and it's been great. Yeah, I'd say definitely something I would recommend. I think more so when I've gone over to the States. It definitely hasn't been the same kind of reception at the airports.
So given that, would you ever consider going to any of the American conventions because of the difficulties that you feel that you would have to encounter actually even physically getting into the convention centre? Passport and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, probably not with the current incumbent White House. I think it's probably not the best time to be going. I think it's probably going to be more trouble than it's worth. But yeah, who knows? Post November, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's because the rest of us obviously take lots of things for granted, and this is what most of this has been about the kind of we've all sleepwalked into a way of being around each other and not thought about how that's different from other people. So, it's always stuck with me. I mean, there was a particular instance I know at one of the London conventions, if you remember, where I had to come and rescue you from the bouncers who were giving you a hard time. I don't know if that was anything other than the fact they didn't like your trolley, but there was a certain awkwardness there in that interaction where I did think, looking as a bystander trying to calm things down, I'm not entirely sure if I had this trolley, I would be having this trouble. Do you think is that something you think about? Is that something in the moment that you were thinking about? Is this something more behind this?
I think because obviously you don't see anybody else having any kind of issues. I think it's hard to not think, is this something that I've done or something I'm doing, or somebody else's view of what I'm doing, I guess, or who I am. I don't know. But yeah, I think the fact that through a whole weekend of going to that place, I'm not observing anybody else having any issues. I think it's tough to think of anything other than that.
So if there's anyone in my life I wouldn't think of as a victim, I think it's you. I think if there's anyone that is prepared to stand up to any sense of injustice, even if it is Lego based, it would certainly be you. I mean, you're very opinionated, you're obstinate, and you're willing to fight your own corner. So this is not a conversation about you per se. It's about what would essentially put other people who are not so forthcoming, who are not so comfortable in themselves as you are.
I think
a
lot of the stuff really, online. I think with a lot of the discourse online, I think even recently, I think I saw on one of the other groups somebody posted a chart about the 100 designers of the games on BGG, and what percentage of them were white male and what percentage were for everything else. And I broke the first rule of the internet and started to read the comment, and you just think anybody who might have had something more progressive to say, they would look at the comments, and other than actually answer positive, they would just walk away. And to be honest, I'm guilty that I read some of the comments and I just turned around and left it. And I think it's unfortunate that one of the downsides potentially of everybody having a voice online is that it tends to be the angriest and the loudest who get the most airtime. So
do you think this whole atmosphere of discourse has robbed you of your voice then?
No, I don't. I think if anything, I think probably people are actually reaching out more and wanting to talk about it, and obviously things like this are a really good opportunity to do that. I think some of the discourse might potentially be a bit painful and maybe not what you'd call healthy. I think you've only got to look at stuff like what happened with Eric Lang this week on Twitter. So it's not necessarily always healthy, but I think it's necessary. And I think, especially with online, I think the main thing is for it not to be something that is a hot topic for a week or a month, and that people at whenever time in the future can even bring up and say this thing in a game or this theme or this picture in a game, whatever it might be. I'm not okay with it, or I have mixed feelings about it, and they're not attacked for feeling like that. I think it's when people raise probably a case for somebody else to argue, no, it is okay. I just for saying, no, I hear what you're saying. I can definitely see that. We're not telling anybody else to agree, but I think it's more that people need to be able to kind of raise.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing Five Tribes with you, and the slave cards, and I remember getting the slave cards coming, because I've never played the game before, so I was unaware that the cards were even in the game. And they came across, and I did remember thinking and looking up and looking at you to see how you'd played the game before, I know, but it's things like that, just being aware of the fact that you're sharing the space with other people, and their feelings and their beliefs are just as valid as yours are.
Yeah,
and
I think
things that were okay, maybe not okay now. But there was also that
problem with, I think with anything where you've got a small kind of cottage industry built on kind of one man in his shed that has very quickly become like a global business. They haven't really, when it was just a one man designer kind of show, and even a lot of small publishers, they don't really have, there's not much oversight. You pretty much make games. Those people have been successful. People have bought their games no matter what the subjects or themes have been, and no one's ever said anything. And I think to now start to tell those designers or publishers or people behind the games that some of these things maybe are a bit questionable, some of those conversations are quite difficult. I think there's loads of developers and people doing some really interesting things, but you look on Kickstarter, there's still there's still questionable things when it comes to how women are depicted in games still as well. So there's still definitely a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the discourse with Eric Lang is been about his opinion on Gamma, who sit at the head of this particular industry, and their lack of leadership, and what they will and won't say, and what they will and won't actually stand up for. So I think anyone that feels this hobby is as progressive as it should be, is again sleepwalking through what the changing times that we're all going through at the moment.
Yeah, I think we're probably behind a lot of other entertainment industries like films, TV, and even something a bit more comparable like video games. You think they had, Gamergate and their kind of movement on that side of things a number of years ago, and the fact that board games are really only talking about things now it shows that we're probably a few years behind all those other industries.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got many other hobbies apart from board gaming. And sport being one of them. I've already mentioned that you've turned into some sort of very small real life farmer. But the discourse around on social media around hobby gaming, like board gaming, how do you think it differs? Is it better or worse in other hobbies that you're involved with? I mean, you're also a critic, aren't you, for film and TV programs on Letterboxd? What sort of I'm just going to say aggression, but aggression is the wrong word. What sort of negativity do you encounter in those other hobbies, and how does it compare?
Like I said, I think a lot of other industries, a lot of other hobbies, I think are probably a little bit, as much as we might think of as kind of fairly smart people and progressive thinkers, I think there's still pockets within, there's different types of gamers, whether it's, war gamers or, people who play RPGs or tabletop miniature games. I think there's definitely still pockets within the kind of gaming hobby that are very differently minded. So I think even just saying board game hobby, I think there's still that covers a broad cross section of people still. But no, like I said, I think compared to where people in film are at and TV are at, I think they've had a lot of these conversations. They've been having them, whether it's who gets cast for what films, and whether you're changing the race of somebody in a book, film to TV, or that kind of stuff. I think they've having those conversations for a number of years. So, and they're still having them. Whereas I think this seems to be quite a new thing when it comes to board games. So I think looking across the Facebook group and a lot of the places, there's some really good conversations happening. And I think what needs to happen is that we carry on with that. But I think where the admins and people like yourself can play a part is where it does tend to get a little bit more heated, or where it does tend to get angry. I think it's important that we attack people for not necessarily for having an opinion, but for kind of how they're expressing it.
Yeah, I think that's a thing. It's a sensible thing to say, because what you don't want to do, you don't want to shut down conversations, do you? You want to
Yeah.
actually extend the communication lines. You don't want to feel that anyone has to retreat back into a shell hole.
Yeah, I think you know, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who says I am racist or I am, because most people would, but then it's more about kind of subconscious or unconscious behaviour or bias. So you're never going to get anybody to admit they're A or B. So the whole kind of calling people out, whether it's, you know, cancel culture, that kind of thing. I think ultimately, if a designer or a publisher isn't necessarily listening to feedback, ultimately, I think hopefully gamers will vote with their wallets. I think.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate power, isn't it?
Yes.
Ultimately. Now, going back to a kind of conversation about nature over nurture, or nurture over nature. So everyone can see your background, mate. We can see shelves and shelves of games. So I think it's fair to say you're fairly obsessive in your hobbies, in the way that you collect things. You know, I keep pulling your leg about the small farm you've got going back in your back garden. But I think what you've done is you've collected every growable plant. As opposed to, you have, haven't you? You've got an example for every plant you possibly could grow. So there's a certain amount of completionism going on in terms of your psyche.
An element of got to catch them all, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Pokemon. Yeah. So can you see the roots of that going back into a cultural thing with you, or is it more of a sort of the way that you were nurtured?
I don't. Maybe an element of nurtured. My dad. I think, you know, as much as people might joke about me being tight or loving a deal, I think I am.
We're not joking. We're not joking.
Yeah, I think most of the people, I think if you ask them on the group where they might have first encountered me, was probably across a lot of the board game sales group posts and that. I think there was a couple of years where anything that would get posted, I'd pretty much jump on straight away and snap it up. So hopefully I've got a bit better with that. But
yeah, you have. Yeah, you have. I think the people you're living with have more of a say in that than you do, though, don't they? Because you're. Yeah. I mean, one of the other questions that Steve asked was, where do you store it all? And I think I can answer that for you, Steve. It's in every room of the house, because Vicky has told me that you're virtually taking the whole house over now, aren't you?
Yeah, I think other than the kitchen, I think there's pretty much games in every room at the moment.
So another nature over nurture. I think culturally, you were basically encouraged not to trust in luck. That hard work would be the way forward for you to actually develop your life and actually be successful. Mm-hmm. So do you see that sort of seeping into the games that you enjoy? Do you enjoy a lot of luck in your games, or not at all?
No, I think probably as most people, I'd probably definitely lean more on the Euro side of the fence when it comes to games, less dice rolling, and I kind of more. I guess that appeals more to kind of mathematician brain in me, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you are a maths. You've got a maths degree, haven't you? So from that point of view, I think it's probably one of the other reasons why you enjoy the trick-taking games as well, isn't it? It's the actual. I can always see your eyes flutter when you're playing those games, working out the odds.
Yeah, there's a big kind of, especially in trick-taking, there's a big kind of logic and deduction kind of element where every hand that's played, you're gaining more information about what cards are out there, what cards aren't out there, and as old as that system is, you know, we've got new games like The Crew kind of giving it a fresh look paint, you know, and doing really well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to break a confidence now, mate. Okay. You're going to have to lean in a little bit further, because this. No one's watching. Don't worry, no one's watching. It's just you and I. So, do you remember we were going to do this many years ago? Can you remind me of the code name we had for our operation to actually release YouTube content? What was it called again? Can you remember?
I think it was it Operation Catflap?
Yeah, Operation Catflap. So with that code name, why do you think it never was successful? I mean, what?
Well, I think part of it was I moved to the other side of London, I think. So that was
you did. It was nothing to do with the Operation Catflap as a name. I agree with you, absolutely. Yeah. But we've known. I mean, it's obviously no surprise to anybody that's watching this. We've been friends for quite some while now, and if I wasn't married, mate, it'd be you. It'd definitely be you. Especially as you look like a
collection.
Yeah, it'll be almost the world would tilt on its axis, wouldn't it? But we've run a couple of very small, very tentatively small kind of gaming. Sorry, Mark. I hope you're not listening, Mark. We've kind of rivaling aircon in a very small way in London. We've done a couple of those last year, didn't we? Because I think you agree with me that London's very poorly served in terms of the board gaming community when you consider the size of the board gaming community in London. So we've tried to do a few bits and pieces like that together. But so my last question to you, young man, is that given the time and the energy, and if you've got the crop in before the winter, if you had the time and the energy to actually continue your exploits maybe on YouTube, because I think you'd be quite good. I think you explain yourself quite well. You could specialise in trick-taking games, obviously. But if you also were to sort of develop your ideas in terms of live events, that kind of thing, what in particular would take your fancy?
Today, I
want no part of it, by the way. But what would you do?
Yeah, I think obviously with the pandemic and everything, obviously kind of convention holding is probably going to take a little bit of a backseat time being. I think like most gamers, I think everyone's probably got a little bit of an ambition to get a game of their own out there, but I'm not quite sure whether that's the avenue I'm going to end up going down. I think probably more, like you said, the kind of the YouTube podcast or something like that. I think I still kind of got a few ideas along those lines talking about. So yeah, watch it.
You've got a letterbox account, haven't you? And I know we've got some details that we're going to pop up in respect to that, so people can see how wrong you are in your opinions about virtually every popular film. But I know you're also planning to do a father and son kind of thing with you on films, where he basically tells you what he likes and watch, and you tell him how wrong he is.
Yeah.
Can you see history repeating itself with you and your father in this in any way?
A little bit, yeah. I think we were knocking about what we're going to call this podcast, where he recommends films to me and I tell him why they're rubbish, basically. And at the moment, we're calling it dadsplaining.
Well, that's good. That's good. I like that. That's very good. Right, so I'm going to end with a question from Chewy. Now, I assume this is just not his judgment on what we've been talking about, but Chewy would like to know, have you ever played a game called Oh Hell? It popped up when we were talking about cultural games from the Far East and maybe from South Asia. Game you recognise. So I'm really pleased that I finished with that question, because it's killed everything stone dead. So that's obviously the place to end this. So thanks for coming on, mate. I know how private you are, and I was really surprised when I asked you, actually, when you said yes, to be perfectly honest. But given the things I wanted to talk about, I thought I couldn't think of anybody else I'd rather talk to them about with. So thanks for that. So this will be on our YouTube channel later. Mark, who's working his magic in the wings, will pop up, obviously, a link to our YouTube channel. Sorry, Mark, if that's dropped that on you. He's also got a link to your Letterboxd account. And well, I haven't seen you 6 months, so this has been brilliant. I've spoken to you a couple of times, but I haven't seen you. You still got that same old shirt on. But we have to get together soon, mate, because I do miss you, and it'll be great to actually see you again in a gaming environment.
Definitely.
So thanks for that. Thanks for people who's watched. Hopefully that's been in some way entertaining for our one viewer. You were really nervous about how many people will be watching this, weren't you?
Yes.
But you didn't need to be nervous. And it's Vicky. And she knew everything you were going to say anyway. So that's where we're going to end it today. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my mate explain himself to you, because I've had to do that for many years. And next week, we'll be doing something else. But if anyone's interested in coming on for tales from the group, please get in touch with Mark, and we'll pick somebody to victimise next time. So from me, it's good night. Good night.